is it going to feel like the world's caving in on you? Or are you going to take a step back and say, this is just a day in the life of, these things can't be fully solved. These just need to be managed.
Yeah.
Part of that management means I need to get my head right around how I look at these problems so that they don't crush me every time they come up. I now expect them. Good morning, Matt.
Rick, welcome back.
Thank you, sir.
Been on the road a lot, buddy.
I have. I was at 2 different franchise conferences talking to consultants. So a couple of different networks, one in Colorado, one in Louisville. And it was great. We launched in 2 brand new consultant platforms. So you got to go out and, I mean, certainly we have the Repum team who's given us the bandwidth on sales, but it's always good if the founder shows up. It shows the consultants that you're serious. And, you know, I mean, a lot of founders are so crazy that they struggle to sell because they just get so into what they do. But I think, you know, I've been in it long enough to understand, you know, there's a lot of fitness in franchising, but I'm cognizant of that. So I don't sit down like I can understand what they're thinking is, oh, here comes yet another fitness brand. And knowing what their mindset is, I can then align it in a way that they're like, oh, okay, now I get it. So you service an underserved avatar. It's personal training, but you're still training people in this like small group format. So it's like you get all the pluses of the community of a class-based concept, but you get the personalization of a personal training. So it's fun to be able to explain that and just see the light bulb come on. And I just have such a deep knowledge of what we do. That's almost hard for anybody else to understand. Like I was talking to a guy and he's like, yeah, like, you know, that would be me. I mean, that if you explain it well, the person sitting across from you is typically in the same age bracket in these settings.
Does this turn right into a starting point session?
It does. Like I joked. So each meeting was 10 minutes long and I joked, I would say 30% of them were 10-minute fitness consultations for the consultant. But I'll tell you what, like all you're trying to do is build a relationship, right?
Right.
Once you tell them what we do and who it's for, they're listening, but I can see their eyes and their mind is like wandering off into something else. And basically what it ends up manifesting itself as is they start asking you questions about, what do I do with this?
How much protein should I be eating?
Yeah.
How much do you bench?
Right. Basically it goes there. But I mean, if that's where it's going to go, I'd say, well, if I was you this, and then it allows me to then, like one guy was a golfer, like, what would you do with me? I'm like, oh, it just so turns out that our induction process is very similar. And the same company built the induction process for the Titleist Performance Institute. So TPI, he's like, really? So got all into it. He's like, man, this is super exciting. And he even like emailed me later that day at a busy show like that. He's sitting there, you know, receiving 10-minute meetings from like 9 to 5 all day long and still remember to email me and say thanks. And I sent him a couple of, back videos from like Dr. McGill and stuff like that. So anyway, it's
everybody knows they need this stuff. Like it all hits them
when you see their light bulb come on. But how well are you explaining it when you're looking at the person across the table and the light bulb comes on and they start thinking of how what you do could apply to them personally?
Right.
That's awesome. So, you know, I joke about doing a fitness consult, but I didn't see it at all as like a detraction from the sale because that's what they want to talk about. And they could see themselves, they're the perfect avatar for us typically.
Right.
They could see themselves doing it. A couple of them are like, oh my gosh, you know what? I'm like, what? They're like, I already work out with a trainer at a gym and there's 4 other people and we work out together. I've been going there for like 5 years, 3 times a week. I'm like, so that's what we're franchising. They're like, oh, nobody's doing that. I'm like, right. So it was really good, man. All the meetings were great, but
that's what I like about Discovery Days. People come out and they get to see it and touch it, and they're like, it really hits home to them. It's all about them. Yeah,
and then they could see like, oh, well, and that's what it should be. And then they can see, I would do this. I'm in the same socioeconomic group as the people that will buy it. They connect the dots. That's why we're batting 1,000 for Discovery Day for the most part.
It's probably a lot different than like dumpster removal or something.
Right. Yeah.
All right, you pick up that bag and you throw it in there.
I was talking to a buddy of mine. He sold a big tree service company for $100 million or something a few years ago, and he was talking about what they would do at Discovery Day. It was mostly men for whatever reason would come to Discovery Day. Tree removal, it was typically guys that maybe had some interest in that industry, but he would take them out to like the lumber yard and let them like run the machine that split the logs.
Scale that tree.
Yeah. Not that, but that would have been awesome. Yeah, get up there. Like, I don't want to go up there. Get up there. But he would let them run the big remote control that would like split these giant trees. Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. We were just like every guy's the same. We're like, whoa, that's so cool. So there is something to giving somebody an emotional response. Yeah. So I rolled in last night, and then straight away, man, the missus was like just being her normal self. And I was like, what is wrong with you? She's like, blah, blah, blah. And something about her pants didn't fit well. And I was like, look, your underwear are like way too tight and they're way too revealing. And then she looked at me and said, well, then wear your own then. Boom. Dad joke setup of the year.
Dude, I never ever saw that a mile away.
No, you didn't. Nobody saw that coming. Not even you, Matt. You should have seen the confusion if you're not watching this on YouTube. Matt was just like, wow, this is a great story, Rick. What happened next? And then, bam, got him. Do you have a dad joke, Matt?
Yeah, I accidentally took my cat's medication. Don't ask me how. All right.
Don't ask meow?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
I'm giving full credit to our New Zealand friend, Sam. He sent me that sex joke to say on the podcast. Thank you, Sam.
Oh, yeah. So it's we're pretty much there. So by the time this comes out, it'll be done. So we are going, a big announcement. We're going into New Zealand. We'll probably do a podcast on that. Maybe even have those guys on as guests to talk about why and what they plan to do with it. But you're aligned culturally with your master franchise partners in another country when they're also competing with you for who has the best dad jokes. So,
yeah, he literally sent that to me via our app.
That's the best. Through the app.
Yeah.
I love it. Oh, that's awesome. Well, let's get down to some business. And I think today's topic is one that's near and dear to me, and it has been for 30 years because it's something that entrepreneurs deal with. It's really about problem solving. And I think an entrepreneur ultimately is a problem solver at heart, because to run a business, you first have to identify what the business will do. And to do that, you have to identify where there's a problem in society or with a process or how to make something easier or faster or whatever. And then you say, oh, here's a gap and something that would be a viable solution for people for a problem or a challenge. Yeah. I'm going to build a machine or, what have you, franchise with Alloy to fill this gap in this problem in the market. So problem solving is inherent to all entrepreneurs. That being said, what I want to talk about today is there is a paradox, if you will, between problems to be solved and whether or not they can be solved. And I think a lot of problems, they can't be fully solved. And I think that's really hard for people to accept that and to understand it. And yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today, is just different types of problems. And I'm going to ask you some questions about, from the brick and mortar standpoint, what are some things that fit into this? So the way I see it is, again, there's two types of problems potentially. One is there's problems that you can solve, meaning like, okay, this is a challenge in our business. Your goal or initiative is going to be to figure out a solve that will solve that problem. And in your mind, and it's probably Pollyanna and a little bit like, pie in the sky, I'm going to create one solution that's going to solve this problem forever, right? That feels great.
Right.
I think if we're honest, though, there are some problems that you can solve that way, and we'll use some examples. But I think more often than not, most problems aren't going to be 100% solved. They're just going to be managed. So if you are a perfectionist or you are someone that enters entrepreneurship with an unrealistic expectation, you need to prepare yourself for the fact that there's certain problems that you will always be managing 25 years from now. I mean, I've been in business 30 years. There's some things that I'm still managing today that I was managing 30 years ago. And if you had told me then, I was like, oh, no, I'll have it all worked out. But the nature of the problems just don't lend themselves to a full solve. A lot of them are people involved, right? And people aren't static creatures that just do exactly what you do. They don't think exactly the way you do. I mean, clearly. So yeah, that's what I want to talk about today. So let's start with the brick and mortar, because that's your world and has been for a long time. Is there any examples you can think of, or let's just have overreaching thoughts on that? Because we didn't do a lot of prep to get you here. So what are your thoughts on that? Problems that you can fully solve that would just be like, I'll put them to bed, I'm good, versus problems that are always there, but you just put SOPs or standard operating procedures in place, and then you manage them. What are your thoughts on that?
This actually just came to me while we were sitting here, is one thing that we are always having to manage, and because we can't solve it because it's not ours, is a lot of times technology, right? Some things don't work, whether, like the schedule doesn't work or whatever it is. And a lot of times you're just managing, people. whether they're your customers or your team. There's no solve. Like I can't go make the app. Like how many business owners can go like, oh, I can fix this app and I can solve this problem.
Right.
No, you're just
Let me
managing.
jump in here and do some coding.
Yeah, hold on, guys, I got this. Right.
Right.
That's something that happens all the time. So we help, for our franchisees, let them know this, prepare, coach your team. If it's whatever, manage your clients, right? And that's something that's never going away. Probably.
Yeah. And I think, as an example, every business, and I don't care who you're talking to in whatever industry, typically your CRM is not your favorite piece of software. Like we work with the largest one in the fitness space. We've got the best version built out for you, as simple as we can get. It's still not foolproof. And so to think that you're going to finally, I've got this bolted to that with this, right? It's going to be perfect and I'm never going to have any issues. You would say then through your lens, that's an unrealistic expectation.
Absolutely.
Because it's tech, right?
Right.
Yeah. Like they go through some kind of
they got hacked. Oh, the power went out. What are you going to do?
They did an update and it disconnected this or that. Again, all of these things sound like, oh my God, that stuff happens. It's like, yeah, it happens to every business all day.
Yeah, no matter what business you're in.
Right. And of course, that's the healthy paradox that we're talking about, you guys, is like you're pushing for an ultimate solution, but you're preparing yourself mentally where if you don't get an ultimate solution, that's okay. Just the pushing towards it is where you're going to get better.
Right.
But if your expectation is, why can't this be solved? You're going to be very frustrated. So we'll punt it back to me and then we'll just kind of go back and forth. But in the franchise industry, it was the same thing. It's like, why can't we come up with an SOP that just solves this forever? It's like, well, there's people involved, right? And so we might say, okay, we need you to do this, this, and this. And then we would be so confused and upset as to why someone chose to do something different than exactly what we laid out. Well, you're dealing with human beings.
Right.
They have their own ideas. They bring their own, maybe they're successful in another business. So I'm going to do it this way. I know a lot about this function, build out or real estate or whatever. So I'm going to do this on my own. I think I can do this well. It's like you have to expect that, and then you have to manage that, but you can't just fix it completely. It's just the way people are wired, right? And when you allow for people to be involved in any processes, it's going to get messy and confusing. And so the key is all right, sure, you continue to stack, guardrails and systems in place as you start to see these repetitive things. Doesn't mean it's going to fix it 100%.
I mean, if just, throwing this out there, and when people are involved, if anything really just supremely solvable without having to manage a little bit.
Yeah, I guess it's a kind of a duh statement. Right? Matt's like, why are we doing this podcast? Doesn't everyone know this? Well, I would say a lot of this is just through my own experience. It's like, I want things to go a certain way. And again, we'll talk about it through my lens, through the franchising. We've got all of these different vendors that we work with. All of them operate at a very high level, and they do a pretty good job. But at the same time, there's a lot of moving parts to, say, a build out, right? So, say real estate, so we start with that. That's always messy and not that much fun for folks because you're going out and landlords might respond or they might not, and they might this or might not. And you're hearing this sort of feedback. And when we first kicked off, it was like, oh man, we need to fix this. Let's get a different real estate vendor, or let's do this, or let's do that, right? And what you come to learn over time is this is just part of the process. And then what you do in response to that, instead of saying, okay, we need an absolute fix 100%, it's impossible. It's not going to be fixed. So then you say, okay, it needs to be managed. But you're also then able to understand that it just needs to be managed. Then you can go back and realign expectations with, say, franchisees and say, okay, in this process, it's averaging this many days to find real estate, right? It's going to be crazy. Some landlords respond, some don't. It's going to be messy, but here we're going to be making sure along the way that we're keeping track of where you are as well and pushing this ball down the field. But it's not just one fix, it's just this one function. If we just get a new person for this, fix everything. Doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I mean, we do this all the time, and a lot of problems. Everybody first, kind of what you want to do is you want to solve it immediately.
Right.
But first, you got to take a step back and see if it's all right, is it that big of a problem? Can I just manage this through the process? Is like, do I have to go in there and solve it? Like, does it even need it? It's only one client that had this issue. Is this even a deal? Like that kind of deal.
Well, to your point, in the brick and mortar, I'm sure you've heard that before, where you'll have somebody report in like everybody wants blank, or
Right.
everybody's doing this. And then you know now to ask that question, like, what's everybody?
Yeah.
And when you dig in on the stats, it's like 3 squeaky wheels that want some kind of like, I don't know what, some kind of flavored water or something at the desk every day. And you're like, wait a minute, it's 3 people, right? It's not everyone.
I don't like how the towels are folded.
Right. Yeah, we need to come up with a new system to refold all the towels. It's like, why? Well, nobody likes the way they're folded. Well, who's nobody?
Bob.
Everyone. Yeah. It turns out it's Bill in the evening. He doesn't like rolled towels. He likes squares. It's like, well, you know what? We're going to have to manage Bob, but we're not going to redo an entire system based on one complaint. And that's a great example of things that if you jump at every little opportunity.
Well, that perfectionist type person is definitely going to want to do that.
Yeah, but
tinkerer.
Wouldn't you say though, like even us, we've gone through it a little bit. I know I have personally. It's like a growth. It's an opportunity to grow as a leader and as a business mind to understand that there's a healthy friction between pushing for as close to perfect as you can get and also not having a flat out emergency over every little problem, right? It's not like, oh my God, the whole thing's burning down because there's one problem. And our team we push to make things as perfect as possible.
Sure.
But the way we're wired, if we're not careful, it can lend us to every little thing that pops up is this complete catastrophe that has to be fixed. And it's bad for culture. We won't survive it personally because we'll be so stressed about every little thing that pops up, right? But it's just something to be managed. And I know for me, I still have a long way to go there because I get really irritated. Like we have shirts that literally say, do your job. We did our podcast last time on, this is our first core value. I want everybody to do their job and I want them to do it perfectly.
Sure.
But while I'm pushing for that, unrealistic that it's going to happen. On our team with vendors, clients don't always act how you want it. For the brick and mortars, it's just the way it works.
All right. What are some solves that you've done just say that, you've had a brick and mortar gym for 30 years. What's some solves? What's some big ones?
Well, like here's an example. So when we went through in 1998, when we went through our big hiccup, it was because I was letting trainers do all of their own program design and sort of build a clientele, exclusive of the gym, right? At the exclusion of the gym. So it was like, that was something that when we had a bunch of people leave because they were basically 1099 contracted self-employed trainers doing their own thing, building a business at the expense of my business while I had all the risk and had done all the marketing to bring them in. It was like, I'm never going to do that again. So our solve for that, which has stuck for this many years and been a major shift in our business, is that we will globally control the induction process and the program design. We own that. It's our customer. We decide who does what based on our experience in the industry. That does a couple things. I don't have to hire experts then. I can hire the athlete, which is a person that looks the part, fun to be around, and I've got a system that I can plug them into, right?
To solve people going off the rails, having to look for like that superstar trainer, everything you need.
Right. It makes it scalable. You don't have to hire, again, exercise science major that knows how to do all this program design and everything. And so that's a perfect example of like, here's a problem, here's a solve, and it solved that problem, period.
Yeah.
Now, to your point, though, and I think this is where, like, when you and I were just sitting down, you're like, what are we talking about? And then you were joking, like, is that even a thing? Like, can anything be totally solved? So let's say that the solve is global programming for all, whether it be licensees and now franchisees. Like, this is what you run this play on this day, right?
Right.
Who's involved in that process? Isn't there humans involved in that process? Yeah. So is it going to be realistic for us to expect that when there's 100 franchises in market and the one in, who knows where, Spokane, Washington, has a part-time trainer that works 2 nights a week, goes to a seminar, learns some wackadoodle exercises that he thinks he wants to apply or she wants to apply, comes back and goes completely crazy, and does their own programming that day. Is that going to happen? I think so. It's probably going to happen. So is the program design then, which is the permanent solution? It did solve the overreaching problem, but to your point, I think this is what you're saying. I think you build the standing operating procedure that solves it.
Yes.
But you still have to manage it. So there's never like one solve that fixes all things. Everything for the most part needs to be managed. Would you agree?
Yeah, unless we're working with robots.
Exactly.
I mean,
We're getting
even if you
there.
had a restaurant, you're making a chicken sandwich, and I decide that I don't want pickles on the chicken sandwich anymore, and change it. Somebody's got to be there to to tell me not to do that.
Well, and how many times? I mean, like I like Chick-fil-A. It's an Atlanta-based franchise. They make good chicken sandwiches. I like to eat them. Inevitably, every now and then, I'll get a grilled chicken sandwich for whatever reason. I don't want grilled chicken. I didn't order that. I ordered the regular chicken sandwich. Not that bad for you.
You storm
Tastes
in
way
there?
better. Oh, I go in there and I throw it in the face of the poor person at the register, and even though they just started,
No, you
and I
don't.
scream and I Karen the shit out of everyone there. Scream at the manager, and I talk about how emotionally distressed I am and how it's just going to ruin my whole week. And yeah, it's tough. No, I don't do any of that. But to your point, how much more systematic can you get than Chick-fil-A drive-through? Every now and then your order's going to be jacked up because there's people involved.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you buy a franchise. We have systems in place. It solves a lot of the issues that arise because of it, especially in our realm, right? Talking about trainers, talking about expertise, whatever it may be. But you still have to have some managing, right? There's very few things out there that you don't have to manage.
Right. Especially if people's involved. Well, I would say it goes back to, again, basically I'm just beating a dead horse. Just basically what you said, that you can build an SOP and there are some things that are solvable globally that fix the problem. They're still going to have to be managed. One thing I think of a lot that I used to fall victim to, and I know I talk to young gym owners and they fall victim as well, where certainly new franchisees, like you go out and you hire your team and you get this feeling like this is my team. Like this is it.
Yeah.
Got it. Right. And you just are somehow under this delusion that this perfect team that you've put together is going to stay forever, right? Like we got it. Like this is it. Bam, done. Finally got my team together. Inevitably, 2 weeks later, somebody's moving, right? Or they finished physical therapy school and they're your part-time trainer that everyone loves. But guess what? The whole time they had planned to move back to Utah, where their family's from, to go to work as a physical therapist. That was their whole plan when they came to work for you. So I think that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Like, don't fool yourself and get into this delusion that all of a sudden, I've got my perfect team. It's never going to change. It's always going to change.
Yeah.
We did a whole podcast on that.
I did build a solve for that, though.
What was that?
Literally onboard any new people. It's all there for you.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
always
again,
set
like,
up.
okay, so the SOP is like what we've built in the franchise. It's like, here's one click for onboarding a new coach. Here's one click for onboarding a new director and all the things they need to know. There's still people involved. Right. Right. So like the investor has to like point people to the thing, right? Or the director has to point the part-timers to the thing. You have to make sure they've done it. You have to hold them accountable. So I think it is a healthy friction between the two, but I just want entrepreneurs listening, and if there's any potential franchisees listening, that we're going to push for absolute perfection, and you should too as a franchisee, but you also have to be very realistic about some of the problems. Like, okay, do part-time trainers turn over? Yes, by default, they're part-time.
Right.
If you have them for a year, that's great. But guess what? We already know that. So we've already built a quick onboarding process. We control the programming, so you don't have to go and find somebody that's very difficult to find, right? You find the athlete, train the skill. We've talked about that a million times. So we build those, but it's still going to be a pain when someone leaves or whatever. It's just part of it. But there's no business that's any different than that ever, right?
If your cook leaves, you got to get a new one and train them.
But I think it's important for people to hear this, because if you don't, and you somehow have in your mind that like, I'm just going to do like I'm going to do these three things, and then the business is going to be set, and then I'm just going to set it and forget it and never touch it again. It's like, you're going to be sorely disappointed, because it is a constant leadership managed. Not a lot of time necessarily, but it's a constant paying attention to what's going on. It's, again, steeling yourself against the fact that we did a whole podcast, rivers and ponds. Some people stay forever, and you're going to need to like keep them motivated and refreshed. That's probably the director in our role. Some people are going to churn through. Those are your part-time trainers. So guess what? We've built the systems for that. You need to mentally prepare yourself for that reality, or else you're going to be like, God, everybody leaves. It's like, didn't we tell you that part-timers don't stay more than 12 months typically? If they do, great. If they don't, fine. We have a quick onboarding system to mitigate that. But it's more how you look at it that's going to dictate how you respond. Is it going to feel like the world's caving in on you? Or are you going to take a step back and say, this is just a day in the life of, these things can't be fully solved. These just need to be managed.
Yeah.
Part of that management means I need to get my head right around how I look at these problems, so that they don't crush me every time they come up. I now expect them. How many, I was complimenting you on this in the meetings, like how far you've come mentally, because you're definitely a perfectionist. Like when we did the Enneagram, it's like you want stuff, you want to win, you want stuff to be right. I love that. That manifests itself in great program design without any bullshit, right? It's like it comes out just like it's supposed to be. But how many times early on would you be frustrated, right, with little things that would happen that you now are like, oh yeah, of course that happened. Like that's the way it goes. So here's the fix.
Stress you out, man.
Well, you'll drive yourself crazy, right? You will feel like you're always failing. You're not, but you have to realize that those are problems that aren't to be fully solved. They are to be managed. And so get used to it, basically, is what I'm saying.
No, 100%.
Right?
And that just comes through experience and doing it. It's like, that's a great thing. Again, by buying a franchise is like, we've already done it. I'm going to tell you what's coming around the corner. Like,
right.
This first week's going to be stressful. Get ready.
Yeah, opening your gym's not going to be fun. There's going to be 500 things to do in the final week. It's like you might have to work a little bit more than you normally would. I think to us these seem obvious, but again, having learned it by doing it and now being able to teach it, it's just important that we continue to teach people that there's no there's no fully solved problems. They're just there to be managed. That's in any business. That's in your life. It's like, that would be like saying, well, I'm married now. Great. I'm just checking out. Like, I got a wife. Cool.
Bye. If you keep wearing her underwear, she might leave.
I might. These things are uncomfortable as hell. Can't work out in this.
The thong backwards.
Yeah, it's a moose knuckle. Oops, sorry. On that note, you guys, we're going to let you guys go. But I hope that helps. You guys, if you're getting into entrepreneurship, there's a lot of things that you can improve on always, and you should always be pushing for the best. But also understand that when you get people involved in processes, or like Matt mentioned, even software, things are going to come up. And so your ability to fix those things as they come up, we've already built, if you're getting into an alloy franchise, we already have all the standard operating procedures for all of this, but you're still going to have to stick to them, and you're still going to have to, like, again, steel yourself against the realities of business and working with people that, like, listen, it's an ever-evolving, never-ending problem-solving.
And don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's well, do and don't, right? Like, pay attention to everything while not freaking out if it doesn't happen 100% of the time.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, anyway, I hope that helps you guys. And, yeah, good, terrible dad joke, by the way. Terrible.
That was Sam.
Sam, I'm sorry. I'm sure you told it much better than Matt did, and it was much funnier.
It was via text. You can't tell me it any different.
Matt's really upset right now. Sam, thank you for trying to help Matt. It didn't help at all, though. And we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
See ya.